Hey everybody, we're back with part 2 of the rolling cart project. You can see it here behind me. In the first part, we created the uprights, the rails, the teardrop cutouts using the CNC plasma table, welded the frames, and put the orange bars on it. And that was done in a very short format video of a montage. Really, there wasn't a whole lot to show. There's not a lot fancy in here. I think the fanciest thing is probably cutting the teardrop holes in the sides of the uprights. So if anybody wants to know how we went about doing that, go ahead and comment down below. We'll share that if there's interest. I just didn't go into it because it's just another plasma cut thing, so no big deal. But on this, what we're doing is the intent of this is to be a multi-use station primarily for grinding. I'm grinding on my welding table all the time. And it's not that the grinding's a problem, but it makes a huge mess that I have to clean up before I go and weld the next project and so on and so forth. Also, this will be able to be rolled outside if I have something I want to maybe sandblast on here with the large sandblaster, something that maybe doesn't fit in the sandblasting cabinet. We can take this outside and sandblast on here, and it's got to fall through. So we're going to use expanded metal for the top. And I started with something that didn't work out. So let me grab this and I'll show you what I started with, and then we'll talk about where I went to, and then we'll get into the project of finishing it up. Okay, so I bought all this 3/4 inch tube, square tube. And what I was going to do is make these as frames that you could then simply lie in here because the internal lip on this is 3/4 of an inch back and 3/4 of an inch deep, and it'd make a nice flush surface all the way across. The one thing I hadn't counted on is the fact that these orange rails often bow. So the distance in the middle is further than the distance at the ends because that rail is bowed. Now, I can change rails and do whatever, but instead of fighting that, I'm going to do this a little differently. So the original pallet racking that you buy for this has little inserts that go in these holes, and I'm not sure if you can see them, but there's little holes all the way along here, and it's designed to keep the rails at the same distance all the way across. I don't have that, so this frame mechanism didn't work. We're going to reuse this in the next phase of this, and this I only tacked together because I was testing. So let me move that aside. So what we've done here is we've got some C-channel, and this is 2 inch by 1 inch C-channel, and it fits completely over the top of the beam in general. So what we're going to do is make these where there's some play in them, forward and backward, to account for any of the beams that might be bowed. I don't want to try and pull the beam back because it's just going to make it want to bounce out and pop up all the time. So we're just going to make it where there's enough play that I can do these. Right now I have they're almost 9 feet. It's not quite 9 feet. It's 8, 11, 75 because they're just a little on the inside. So we've got these pieces that are all the way across, and I've just got some steel clamped on them to make sure they stay flush in a regular plane. So we're going to go and do these at 37 inches apart, I believe is my measurement on this end and then on that end. So the steel here is just to make sure they stay square while I measured everything. What we're going to do is bring over a piece of expanded metal and put that on the top, reclamp everything down, and then begin tacking it, squaring it, and getting it all laid out. And then when it's done, I'm going to cut it into 3 pieces. So we're going to have 3 segments that can go in here, and that's going to allow me to be a little modular with this. So one of the segments, I want to have my saw. So I'll be able to take my, my cold cut saw and move it from the center, left, right, wherever I want to go, and use this table to help cutting. So I'll show you that when we get further along, probably in a subsequent phase of the video. But today we're just going to make the top for this. And again, we're going to make it in 1 piece. Then I'm going to cut it into 3 sections once it's all welded together the way I want it. So this is probably going to be another montage series because there's not a lot to talk about. It's pretty visually self-explanatory. So I'm going to go take the clamps off that end and go get a sheet of expanded metal, slide it over here, and start tacking. All right, I'm pausing for a minute here. This is something I hadn't anticipated, actually. The edges of this expanded metal aren't straight. it bows, and I think it's where the metal gets stretched. It was stretched in some directions more than others. So now I'm going to have to find out how I'm going to square this up. It's not too big of a deal. I just got to make sure that I don't have a bunch of raggedy ends hanging over the edge when I'm done. So a little bit of noodle in here to see what's what. I'm going to go grab my straight edge and make sure that piece of channel isn't actually bowed. So. Nope, overall that is straight. The edge of this, however, is far from straight. Very, very interesting. All right, not a big deal. We have enough surface to weld all this to. We just have to account for the bow in the center. Not a big deal. Okay, so now that I know about the bow in the center, we're just going to have to make sure that our C-channel is the same distance apart. I'm going to measure that. We started at 37 on that end, and that ends up being kind of roughly balanced between the spacing that I made here for the card itself. So let's see, all right, we got to come out a little more here. This doesn't matter too much really right now. It's just getting everything aligned is all it is. Okay, 37 each end. Let's check the middle just to make sure these are not bowed. Okay, they are straight, 37 all the way across. And you'll notice I haven't done anything to support this. This is still bowed. Really, this is only laid here so I can tack that edge. And then we're going to insert the 3/4 inch pieces that are going to make up the framing for all of this. So I'm going to start by putting a 3/4 inch piece at each end of this square that we're making sure it's square to give it some end supports. And then we'll just come through and start filling in those pieces in between. You know, scratch that, reverse it. We're going to do this differently. I was originally going to do this all in one shot. And then I realized that putting the spars in here while this sheet is on is going to be a big pain in the butt. So I'm going to take and grind that one little tack off, which is the reason I only put one little tack on there. We're going to square the frame up and then go and put all of the horizontal supports in the frame, put this sheet back on top where it will sit flat, and then we might even be able to give it a little stretch. That way, when heavier things go on here, it's less likely to bow in. So we're going to go ahead and unclamp those, make sure we're 37 again, reclamp everything, and weld some ends on. Okay, everybody, I'm going to pause for a little bit. What I was doing with the angle iron to line up that other piece wasn't working. The 3/4 tube is so narrow that by the time I tried to clamp it to the angle iron, it just wanted to roll. If you're not familiar with it, 3/4 tube, when you're talking about just plain square tube, it's actually not flat on the sides. It's got a bow to it. So if you were to look down, you'd see there's a crown on all the sides. So that crown keeps it from, kind of being flat. And we want to be sure that it's below the plane of the expanded metal so that we have a flat top when we're done. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use these Fireball tool squares. I got a set of these. I have small and large, big set. These have been great. I have the cast iron. They make them in aluminum. I prefer the cast iron just for the durability of them. But they have aluminum. If you're mobile and you want to have a lot of this stuff a lot lighter, the aluminum's nice, but I like the cast. So yeah, they're good squares. But what I really like is this attachment system that they've got. So what they do, I'll show you here, for those of you who aren't familiar, there's these little tabs, and it's just a piece of steel with a hole punched in it, and these little thumb screws. So you can put a thumb screw into these, and I'll show you what that does. It's really kind of neat. It helps to align things so they're all in the same plane. So let me get one more put in, and I'll hold it up for the camera. I mean, most of you probably have seen these already anyway. They're all over the place. Pretty much all the fabrication shops on the internet use them. So that's got to say something, right? We're a machine shop, not just a fabrication shop. And I'll tell you, I can make these, right? It's not a big deal to make this. His are cast and then ground. I would just machine one out. But the honest to God truth is, for what I pay for this, I can't make it for that kind of money. It costs me more in material and labor to make a nice beefy square like this than it did to just go buy it from him. So what we're doing here, however, is on the 2-inch side, the C-channel, this is going to rest on top of the channel. We're going to add some more of these tabs in here so that when the rectangular tube is underneath, everything is going to be pulled up to those tabs, and that makes sure we're all in the same plane. I've already got one of these on the far corner over here. We're going to do this one, and then we'll be able to tack everything up. Then we can just take these and move them to the other end, tack the other end, check it for square, and go ahead and finish weld these pieces in. So let me go ahead and get this done, and we'll go back to the montage here. Okay, so now we got all 4 corners tacked in at the right distance. We're going to measure for square, and I'm going to put a ratchet strap on here. I know for a fact that this base is crooked right now. I've got one really badly twisted beam on here that's making the base a little crooked. So we're going to force the base back into square using that ratchet strap, tighten this all up, weld it in place, then we'll get our cross beams in and our metal on top. So let me go ahead and do that. So let's see where we are measurement-wise. Okay, so I got some 33-inch segments cut up, and that's what fits in between. And I've gone through and divided this into thirds. The actual measurements don't matter. I just wanted it to be thirds. So that way they're all interchangeable and everything works out evenly. And I've marked in each location. And what we're going to have is we're going to have 2 bars at each side of this location. So that mark is the center mark between panels. So we're going to put a bar on each side, and we're going to give it a little bit of a gap, maybe 1/8 of an inch, not too much. We don't want an accumulated mess over the length of the table, but we're going to put those 2 bars in and then tack them all the way along, and then we'll go through and put some center supports in And I haven't decided yet, but I might put a support on the middle or maybe even two, just so if something really heavy goes on this table, I don't have to worry about it sagging into the metal. So we're going to go and get our squares put back on here and start tacking these pieces in. Okay, so what I've got here is just a couple of small nails. Not sure if you can see that. We're just going to use those as spacers between each of the racks just to keep things consistent. Okay, so now we've got all of our major rack segments laid out. I'm going to put some more segments in here. I think I'm going to put 2 in each section. So we'll go 2, 2, 2. So I need 6 more. And then I might put some this way. We'll see. We'll see how it goes over time. I can always add those in later if need be. But I think we're going to start out with doing the 2 supports right now. So I'm going to go cut some more 33-inch pieces and get those in here. And we'll come back and basically repeat all of this. All right, so what I've done now is subdivided each segment in half. I was going to do 2 within each one. And then I started looking at it. I think I'm going to do 1 here, and then I'll cross brace this way and this way. That'll give me even more support internally than just the 2, I think. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm going to start out with the 2. And then what I'm going to do is when it's ready, I'll flip it over, turn it upside down, and just put the bracing in. That way it can be on a flat surface, and I'll just, when I weld the backside and all that stuff. But for now, we're going to go ahead and get these welded in place. Because these are in the middle, their placement isn't really that critical. They're just additional support. So we're not going to square, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go ahead and tack these right in place. All right, there we go. For the most part, we're welded on 3 sides for each of these. That should keep us pretty straight. We probably don't need this for much longer, but we'll keep it on until we weld the sheet on top. So next we got to just go and grind all these welds flat. Bring the sheet over, we'll tack one side, and then I'm going to figure some way to stretch it. I want to get that sheet a little taut, just enough where minor weight isn't going to make it sag. We don't want to go crazy with it, but it'll be nice to do that. So we'll go ahead and get the grinder out, clean up all these little welds, get the sheet on here, and tack the sheet down. You guys might have noticed the sheet is 8 feet long. There's a 9-foot, well, hair under table. So because it's 4 by 8 by the sheet and we're 37 by 9, we're going to end up having to piece together a little bit for the end. So what we're going to do is in the middle of the beam, that's where we're going to cut off one of the pieces of sheet and leave it there. So it won't go all the way to the end, and then we'll patch in a full distance piece from the scraps we have left over, because I've got enough sheets to make a couple of these. I'm hoping to make a lower shelf just for storage down below, and I wanted to use the expanded metal as well. That way stuff that's up here would fall through. Eventually I want to put a drawer underneath here for the grinding station so I can catch all the debris and have an area to empty. But for right now I've got enough to make 2 of these. So we'll start out with that and see where we go. Okay, so we've got our expanded metal back up on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tack it all along that far edge, and then we're going to check for square once more before we go and start tacking all these other pieces. And I do want to get that stretch in there if I can. I'm not sure how I'll do it yet. I'll figure something out. But we want to make sure that we're square before this gets laid down. That way it just goes back down nicer later. So, but first we'll start tacking the edges. Okay, so I was thinking of lots of cool trick ways to stretch this sheet and bring this over so it's nice and taut. And then it struck me, you know, simpler is sometimes easier. Just a small punch, and it's a tapered punch. I'm going to do it in line with the bars first. And all I really got to do is find a place close by, give a little tap, and then pull. And I get a very nice, tight sheet. There's very little wiggle right in there. So that's not too bad at all. I think I'm going to stay with that. There we go. So yeah, I can get quite a bit of leverage on there. Screwdriver might even be better. I think I'll do that, because then I have a longer handle and I can get more leverage to really tighten that in. Okay. So now that we've got that figured out, let's do our square check once more, just to be 100% sure where we're supposed to be. Okay, we are 113.75 basically. It's probably too late to change much with all the welds we put in, but let's just double check anyway. And 113, a little under, so not bad. We're maybe an 1/8 off, and for this, that's plenty. Okay. All right, welder on, screwdriver in hand. Whoops. I'm going to start at the center and work out to make sure I don't have a buckle in the middle by the time I get there. So now this will hold its orientation. We're going to put some more welds around here, but we'll go through and pop a few on the wide surface here to give it more retention. We'll get some more in the middle as time goes on, but for right now that's tacked down well enough. So yeah, the only thing left to do is to trim the excess. We'll just do that with an angle grinder because that'll buzz off in a heartbeat. So we'll tack these in a zigzag along here, trim off the extra, then we'll be able to turn it over and put the supports in. We're going to do that piece, obviously. I got to cut that off and put another piece in there. Not a big deal. We'll just, you know, measure a piece off the extra that goes in there, off one of the other sheets, whatever we need in order to fit that in. But not a big deal. And then once that's done, we take the angle grinder and cut it in between these sections. And then we end up with 3 independent panels. All right. Just going to do these final little welds on here, and then that'll be it. So we'll just, you know, let you watch me tack weld. All right, well, there we go. The basics are done. I'm going to cut this off. I'm not going to do that on camera because it's literally just a grinder running down the edge. Who cares to see that? Same thing for there. I'll cut a little piece and weld it in. Again, not going to do that on the camera, just for that piece. And then we'll cut these into thirds. And that pretty much does it for our tabletop. We've got one more piece we're going to do specifically for the chop saw. So I'll make a second segment on that that addresses the chop saw directly. And we got a few more mods to the table that are coming up that are really going to help, you know, cutting and chopping and grinding. So stick with us and watch the next videos. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.